talk about the implications in a second, but I think our viewers may be wondering just who are these guys?
Right. I mean, there's been a lot going on, so you may have missed the fact that last year Mark Zuckerberg put together this kind of like sci-fi global court with, a couple of Americans who were shortlisted for the U.S. Supreme Court and very kind of distinguished people, a Yemeni Nobel laureate, the former editor of The Guardian in Britain, a real kind of like star-studded global kind of mostly very, very high-end human rights lawyers to essentially offload difficult decisions that Mark Zuckerberg takes endless amounts of heat for making himself.
Is the thinking right now that they will essentially affirm the initial decision to suspend him, but that the odds are good or bad that he'll one day be lifted from that ban, maybe in a few months?
Their exact powers in this situation aren't totally clear. I think people think it's likely that they will say that Facebook was right to temporarily ban him when it seemed like he was inciting violence. But that I think there's a lot of questions about the idea that these giant, almost monopolistic platforms can permanently ban political figures. I think that makes a lot of people nervous. It made Angela Merkel nervous. The president of Mexico compared it to the Spanish Inquisition. So I think there's a pretty decent chance that they either sort of force or at least push Facebook to restore his account in the long term with some kind of guidelines.
Ben, what kind of an oversight board is this? In the sense, I wonder what standard they're using to make their decisions. I mean, is it some kind of international law? Is there an international concept of free speech here? Or is this a way, in sort of a face-covering sense, global face-saving sense, for Facebook to say, well, we got advice from a bunch of distinguished people, not necessarily based on a globally understood standard, but just based on their opinion, and we're acting on that?
I think it's a little bit TBD. The board is really independent. Facebook gave it $130 million and sent it on its way, basically. And it's supposed to basically interpret Facebook's rules in light of global human rights law. And these are very high-powered lawyers who have spent their lives thinking about global human rights law. A lot of the decisions so far have been about, in particular, nipples and whether, where and whether you can show nipples, which is basically like the meat and potatoes of content moderation. So this is a big jump to Donald Trump.
Right. From nipples to Trump is a big jump. And I wonder, how safe is that for a company to put that sort of decision in the hands of outsiders, when it also seems that to some degree they're wary of putting these decisions in the hands of governments who the CEOs maybe won't go and speak to when they're called to, et cetera?
Nobody really wants these decisions. It's a hot potato. In the U.S., the government might set up some rules. They're not going to ultimately make these decisions. And the CEOs don't want to make these decisions either. And so I think they're trying to create a kind of legitimate institution where they can say, hey, look, it's not up to me. It's up to these distinguished people over here. And that I think their hope is that if they do a good job over time, people will respect that.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.